Good morning, everyone. So back in the late 60s, early 70s, or as a lot of kids today like to say, back in the 1900s, and I'm sorry, but that's just wrong. It's totally wrong. Makes me feel like I got to do this in an old man's voice or something. But nonetheless, back then, I grew up in a neighborhood that, and some of y'all who were alive back then may kind of have the same experience, but I grew up in a neighborhood where, we had, you look at like 1 to 2 blocks on either side of our house. We had a whole variety of different kind of families, mostly Catholic, because this was like deep South Louisiana, where most everybody was Catholic. But we did have others that were not Catholic, some without faith, some that were conservative, liberal, a whole variety of people. But even amongst all the differences we had in all these families, there was a sense of we were in our little bubble in the neighborhood. We were almost like one big family, which was kind of cool because all of us kids, we had, in a sense, multiple sets of parents at all these different houses, and we could go and spend time at all the houses, kind of an open door policy. You just go to a house, you walk in, you go sit down with dinner with them. No big deal. And when we weren't playing outside, which, some of y'all don't know what I'm talking about playing outside, okay? Because this was before internet, social media, cell phones, and all that kind of stuff. So all you Gen Z and Alpha kids, we survived that. Without that, and we turned out relatively okay. But it was kind of cool, so there was a really good sense there and a family sense there. Now, the drawback was, of course, that if you ever was doing anything that you weren't supposed to be doing, good chance you were going to get caught, no doubt about it. And every parent in that neighborhood had carte blanche to just bust your ear. No questions asked. So we did have to be careful in that sense. But the beauty of growing up in such a neighborhood was the fact that there was never a shortage of love. Now, I know that sounds kind of corny, but it's true. There was no shortage of love because no matter what house we were at, we were all gathered at having fun. Those parents treated all of us kids as their own. They took care of us. They cared about us. They wanted the best for us. They treated us like we were their kids, all of us. And that was a wonderful thing. We always felt safe, always felt love. And if there was ever a problem with any of the families that were going through a crisis, everybody would gather together, despite all our differences, would rally around that one family where they're dealing with a crisis. And that is something that stuck with me. And that was a part of my growth into an adult and who I am as an adult. And it was because of that sense of love. And that is that part of the central theme of what we see in our readings today, where we are reminded through all of these readings that we are all brothers and sisters. Now, we know that as Christians that we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, of course. We all know that. But what we sometimes can forget is that every single person in the world was created in the image and likeness of God. Everyone, no matter who they are, where they are, what they believe, what they don't believe, what their opinions are, whatever they look like, whether they're good people or not good people, they were still created in the image and likeness of God. And as such, we are all brothers and sisters, every one of us, no matter what. And we are called, we see in these readings, that we are still called to love them all, everyone, to love. And we see in our gospel reading today that Jesus demonstrates that, one of many times where he demonstrates that of going beyond social norms. Because when we look in there, we see this Canaanite woman that is pestering Jesus, keeps coming to him because she's trying to get Jesus to heal her daughter, who she says is tormented by a demon. Now, I know some of y'all are probably going to look at your own kids and go, yeah, I feel her pain. But that's just wrong, guys. But what does Jesus do? Now, here's the thing. This Canaanite woman had 2 strikes against her. 2 strikes. One, being a Canaanite. Because what does that mean? Very likely that means that she was a pagan. She was a pagan. And also, she was a woman. And we know, of course, in Jesus' time that women had lower status than men. So with those two strikes, she had no business talking to Jesus as a Jewish man. And Jesus had no business to be talking to her, to give her the time of day. But ultimately, through her persistence, what does Jesus do? He goes beyond the Jewish social norms, and he went ahead and talked to this woman and healed her daughter because of her faith. In other words, he chose love over the Jewish social norms of that day, which I'm sure caused people to gasp and feel scandalized. But he didn't care. And we see him do that over and over again throughout the Gospels. And this also foreshadows what Jesus, we see, does at the end of the Gospel of Matthew. At the very end of that Gospel, what does he do? He goes to send out his apostles before he ascends into heaven, and what does he tell them? He says, go and make disciples of all the nations. Not just this group here, or that group there, or people that look like this, or people that act like that only. No. He says all the nations, everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what they think, no matter whether they want to hear it or not, go. And they do. I mean, we see in the second reading, what does St. Paul do? He is out there into the world, and he even calls himself the apostle to the Gentiles. The Gentiles being people from the non-Jewish nations. And he is out there with them. Some of them are happy to hear the word and they come to Christ, and others don't. But he gets out there, and the other disciples did the same. And we as Christians are also disciples of Christ, and we are called to do the same, to go out into the world, whether that world is our own home, is the grocery store, our job, or the far reaches, in the middle of Africa or anything. Doesn't matter. We are called to spread the word. And how do we do that? How do we bring Christ to others? Through love. Through love. And that's what Jesus is demonstrating here, and what the disciples are demonstrating. Now, one of the things we see, what is one of the things that Jesus says, one of the last things Jesus says while he's hanging on the cross before he dies? He says, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. We've all heard that, and we all think, wow, that's great. He forgives them, wonderful. But have you really thought about what he's doing there? Think about this. Okay, he is praying to the Father for those people that stood there and spread lies about him. He was praying to the Father for those people who stood there and wanted to release a murderer instead of him. The people, praying for the people that stood there and yelled, crucify him, crucify him. And he also prayed for those who were spitting on him, mocking him, beating him, whipping him as he carried his cross. And he prayed to the Father for those who were driving those nails into his wrist and into his feet and mocked him while he was up there on the cross, struggling to breathe, in pain, dying. And what does he do? He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But think about what that is. He could have, at any point, he could have just commanded fire to come down from heaven and obliterate everybody that was part of this. And then jump off the cross and go about his life. But he didn't. He chose instead to not only ask the Father to forgive them of sins, but what else was he doing? He was showing that he loved these people so much, despite what they did to him, that he still wanted them to experience eternal salvation eventually. He still cared about their souls. He demonstrated perfect love. And that is what we are called as Christians to do, to demonstrate that same love. Easy? No, definitely not. But that is what we're called to strive to do. So good test is that think about somebody in your life that hurt you really bad, or somebody in your family, or whatever the case may be. Think about the person. Don't say it out loud, but think about who that person is. Now, assuming that person's still alive, if all of a sudden you found out, just like today, that person passed away, that person died, what would be your reaction? What is your reaction going to be, and what is your thoughts about what you hope for that person in eternity? Is your first thought and later thought's going to be, I hope he or she rots in hell? Or is it going to be, that you're going to drop to your knees, pray for that person's soul, and hope that the Lord forgives them and brings them into eternal salvation. Think about that. Could you do that? Could I do that? That's what we're asked to do, to spread that love. And why? Because, when we look at all the forces in the universe, what do we have? We have gravity, we have electromagnetism, and strong nuclear forces and weak nuclear forces, all this kind of stuff. And talking about whether strong nuclear force is the strongest one in the universe and all that, but there's one that's stronger than that, and that is the force of love. Love. Because, why? How can we say that? Because what does love do? What can love do? Love can heal. Love can transform. Love can bring light into the darkness. Love can bring hope to the hopeless. Love can turn ugliness into beauty. Love gives life. That's powerful. And why? How can it be so powerful? Because God is love. So when we are loving, when we choose to love like Christ chose to love, then we are imitating Him. We are imitating the Father, because God is love. That's why it is so powerful. It's not just an emotion. It is a force. So brothers and sisters, our world, as we know, is already so full of darkness, so full of hatred and evil out there. So when we are faced with these situations where we have to choose whether we're going to feed into this darkness and evil or we're going to feed into love, I hope and I pray that each of you and myself, that always we will choose love. Always choose love.